My name is Libby Christensen. I am the staff director for the Colorado Food System Advisory Council, and I'll be sharing a little bit about the overview of the group and some of the history, and then we'll be hearing from some of the members of the council to share more about the work that they've been doing, and then we'll kick it off with a panel discussion with three amazing members of the advisory council to share what their roles have been in the council and what they've learned from those experiences. And then we'll turn it over to how to get involved and questions and answers. The Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council was first established in 2010. It was done so with the Senate Bill 10106. I'm happy to share the language of that bill. And then it was also renewed again in 2013. But at that time, there was no state funding for the group. So it was all volunteer-based. There was no staffing for that. Chat is disabled. I'm seeing that in the—
I'll work on it, Libby. You go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dawn. And then starting in 2017, it was amended and there was actual appropriation to support the work of the advisory council. Those resources went towards staffing the advisory council as well as funding for research, communication, outreach, and those things. It was again reviewed for sunset review in 2023. And the real goals at that from the beginning has always been about bringing together different state agencies that are relevant in doing work in food and agriculture, as well as to support and try to do a better job of coordinating efforts across the state in this space. So what is COFSAC? So it is a 23-member legislative body comprised of a broad spectrum of representatives from government and non-government agencies and entities. It's all volunteer-based. It represents a very diverse set of sectors across the food system. And folks have diverse backgrounds and experiences, as we'll hear from our panelists later on. We used to have 17 members, and we start with 13, then 17, and now we've got 23 members. There are 6 state agencies that appoint representatives to the council. We have 5 governor appointments. And then the remaining are on a rotating basis with our General Assembly. And so those appointed positions have specific kind of roles or are responsible for representing certain different groups. And so here's just a list of those different positions. So the purpose is really to provide community-informed, research-based policy recommendations to state leaders to support growing local, regional, and statewide food economies within which producers have access to new markets and low-income populations have access to fresh, affordable, and healthy foods. And as we'll hear from Dawn later on, as she'll give a little bit about how this work has been done in the state. But just to give some more activities that we're doing, we are examining the best practices both within our communities within the state, but also looking elsewhere across the country to advance or improve food distribution systems and develop new markets. We're conducting research and providing support at the request of the governor, members of the General Assembly, or other state agencies in connection with our purpose. So if we're contacted by a representative or an elected official or a state agency that is exploring or considering a new food or ag-related policy, we can help support that and explore the implications of the implementation of those rules. And as policies take shape, we use COFSAC's expertise and relationships to really help understand implementation and alternatives to help refine the parameters of those rules. And again, we're always going to this role of collaboration and coordination. So our areas of focus, as we've been charged by the legislator, has really been in the space of food and nutrition assistance, institutional procurement, direct and intermediated market development, and farm to school programs. And because those can be really broad, big topics, the way that we've really approached it is this working group format. So we have 3 working groups currently that are open to the public, and we'll give an invitation later on and a link to sign up for those working groups. One of those groups is really focusing on institutional procurement, and right now the main focus has been the implementation of the Healthy School Meals for All. The second group is on strategic communication, and that's reaching out, talking to folks at the state and across in Denver, kind of at the state level, but also communities across the state. Just trying to increase the visibility of this group and the opportunities for us to work together, and seeing us as a real resource. And then the third working group is really on member outreach and engagement, and trying to find opportunities for professional development opportunities for food system leaders across the state. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dawn, who will introduce herself, and then we'll go into a few examples of the work that the Food System Advisory Council has been working on.
Thanks, Libby. Again, my name is Dawn Thomany. I am a faculty in the Department of Ag and Resource Economics up at Colorado State University. And I've been one of the more interesting histories in that I think I've served on every role with this. I was in the group that originally envisioned this council many years ago. Then I staffed it for a while, and then I've been a member representing Colorado State University Extension the last few years. So I guess that context lended itself well for me to give you an overview of kind of what our history of outcomes and impacts has been. As you can see on the screen, every year, as asked by the body that formed this, we put out an annual report of what we work on an annual basis. So instead of us trying to cover that all today, we welcome and invite you, and we'll put a link in the chat for you to go to the website and actually peruse those reports to kind of see the full history of our council. But we did want to give you a couple snippets, next slide, of some specific things we've done that might be of broadest interest. Libby just explained to you that our structure and makeup changed a bit a couple years ago. But prior to that, we had a slightly smaller membership. One of our biggest outreach and impacts I think we had was doing a blueprint for food and agriculture for the state. You can see on this slide, we had lots of partners. LiveWell was the former name for Nourish, but at the time we did the blueprint, they were still LiveWell. And so it was a whole, COFSAC engaged a whole set of partners to do listening, a data exercise, a survey of public attitudes, and a set of listening sessions across the state, because we really just felt like we didn't have a good sense of what our state would raise up as being their priority issues in this space. And we felt like that was a good role for this council, because as budgetary decisions were being made by our universities and our agencies, we felt it was good to know what was top of mind with all of the stakeholders out there. So you can go and again look at this report, which now feels a little bit dated, but what I guess we want to highlight with next slide is we actually took action on some of those things that were highlighted in the report. Specifically, each region we visited, and you can see them kind of highlighted here in the map, got their own regional report. So even though we did this to try to get a sense of the statewide priorities, and what we called a statewide priority is if the same issue came up as a high priority issue in at least 3 of these regions, it was elevated to being a statewide priority. But we also just sent each one of these regions, and you can go actually view these and read these, their own report of what their priorities were. Because as we know, even though it's a great state and we try to do things in a unified voice, our regions also had some priorities they wanted to work on, which is what some of our food policy councils are doing. And as an update to that, next slide, even though we didn't do quite as full of an exercise as the blueprint, under the leadership of COFSAC and the Food System Institute at Colorado State, a set of regional discussions was had before the most recent food summits. And now this year, we're excited to say we're going to be back around asking for regions who might want to have their own regional summits again this year. So that's basically my way of saying that one role COFSAC can have is, even though we're a statewide body, we're doing our best to let some of those regional community organizations, energy and initiative, also make sure their voices are in the room, even when we do have to coalesce it to the statewide level. So this last food summit, we had 700 people in attendance, but most of that agenda was dictated by what we heard in regions as being top of mind issues they wanted to talk about. But it was also brought to our attention that people can't always get to the Front Range for these conferences. So we're looking at a pattern where we might alternate that every other year. These summits are held out in the regions with support, perhaps from COFSAC, but also the great organizations that run those. And so stay tuned for what those might look like in the coming year. And if you're on the call and want to be a host of one of those, we'd welcome you to tell us that. Next slide. So again, the whole blueprint has not been updated, but we have tried to keep those regional conversations going. Let's go back to what some of the blueprint said. So of the 8 priorities, we're just going to highlight a couple, but one of them was create and retain ag and food firms. we took that kind of seriously. There was a white paper put together to look at meat supply chains. We don't have that one up there, but that actually spurred us to actually continue working with some regional partners. And now we have a regional food business center whose one of their key themes is building meat supply chain capacity in the West, which is well timed. And we were in a really good position because we had done that white paper right before the federal money started coming out in this space. In addition to meat supply chains, there was a lot of interest in how we could actually use seconds in our produce markets on the West Slope. And so even before this center came afoot, we got our first Economic Development Administration grant at CSU, somewhat motivated by what COFSAC told us they wanted to, and did our first pilot in cooperation with the Food Bank of the Rockies to look at a dehydration processing capacity we might be able to bring online out there. So this is just a couple of examples that when COFSAC does these things, it actually allows some of the agencies and universities around the state to better target the needs of what our regions want. Next slide. Another example of this is another priority. Oh, I guess we took it out, but another priority that we identified in there was quality of life and food security for all. And so universal school meals and that recent initiative was very much spurred by that voice showing up in all those regions in a pretty unified way. And so I think as we move to the panel now, what would be interesting is for us to like focus a little bit about where these were kind of a look back at what COFSAC has done, but we as a council are very open to hearing where people feel like we can continue to make some of these state level discussions, conversations, and priorities resonate to make sure, even though we all have our very place-based priorities, where we can actually bring a unified voice to the state of where there's a pretty harmonized view of what we actually would like to invest in to make sure we continue to be, we're really considered nationally a leader in bringing some new initiatives to foot. And so we want to continue that for Colorado. So excited to hear what the panel has to say. And thanks for the support. Some of you who are on here are from the state, and thank you for the support you've given to this council to do this kind of work. I'll turn it back over to Libby.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dawn, for just giving those examples of the work that's been done so far in the state. Next, we're going to turn it over to Liza, Al, and Julie to share a little bit more about themselves, how they got involved with the council, what role, what you've learned from your work so far, and what advice you would give to others in this space about wanting to get more involved in leadership. But to do that, I'm going to just turn off the screen, stop sharing, so that we can see y'all's awesome faces. So why don't we start with Al, then go to Julie, and then Liza, just because of alphabetical order. If you just introduce yourself, kind of your role in the food system, and how you first got involved with COFSAC.
Hi, everyone. My name is Al. I use he, they pronouns. I'm currently the sales and procurement manager at East Denver Food Hub. I first got involved in COFSAC at the urging of another COFSAC member, Derek Hoffman, who's a produce farmer up in northern Colorado. And he really wanted to see more farmer voices, or at least farmer advocate voices, being represented statewide. I've been working in food systems for almost 10 years. I think every job I've had has been in the food systems. Started off in restaurants, moved into production and farming, got pretty burnt out of that, and decided that working on behalf of farmers would be the next best thing. So I did some food education and school garden management, and running farmers market organizations back on the East Coast, and now in Colorado at the Food Hub. I really focus on creating market connections for local producers, and with that, also providing consumer education on what the food system is, why local food is important, and how it can be accessible. And then most recently, and sort of most importantly with COFSAC, I've been working on institutional procurement and healthy school meals for all implementation.
Wonderful. Thank you. Julie, are you good to go next?
I am. So I'm Julie Moore. My husband and I have Rock River Ranches, which is a supplier of bison meat, both direct to consumer and via restaurants. But I've also worked for the Colorado Beef Council for almost over 26 years. So I represent the beef farmers and ranchers of Colorado. And so I've done that for a long time. And I do that because I grew up on a ranch and I have a passion for keeping farmers and ranchers in business. And so it's part of my livelihood, my culture, my world. Why or how did I get involved in COFSAC? Well, we have to step back a few years because in 2010, I was appointed by the Commissioner of Agriculture to the Farm to School Task Force when it was legislatively mandated. Same time, same kind of process as COFSAC. So I was on the Farm to School Task Force for that entire time and chaired it at some point. We worked on programs for parents, for farmers, for schools, trying to help bridge some of those gaps. Just a lot of it was knowledge because, and we still have that, don't get me wrong, but we started somewhere. Food safety on the farm and how schools want to receive the product. And we've come a long way and we have places to go still. But the Colorado Farm to School Task Force was then rolled into COFSAC when it was reauthorized. And so because I still had that passion for working in the food system, agriculture is agriculture. We're too small to not care about everybody. And so I've done a lot of work for produce and all those different fruits and grains over the years, just because it's the nature of the world. We work on it all. And so I applied for and was appointed to COFSAC. So I've been on COFSAC now since it was redone, and I chaired for a couple of years. And now I work on the same committee as Al, the institutional procurement.
Awesome, thank you. Liza, do you want to go next? You're muted. There you go.
Good afternoon. I'm Liza Marin. I'm really happy to be here. And let's see here. And so I've worked in the San Luis Valley, building a local food system for many years. And the San Luis Valley is a really rich agricultural region down by the border of New Mexico, the largest high mountain valley in North America. And it was originally, a summer foraging and hunting grounds for many indigenous folks who came here. And then pre-industrial food system, it was quite a breadbasket and a supplier of beef and lamb to the miners here. And then we've kind of trended towards a monocropping export model of potatoes and barley and alfalfa here. And there was a big desire by the community when we had a food security gathering about having access to the rich abundance of food that we grow here. And so we worked since about 2009 in creating a local food system in the San Luis Valley through the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition. And we created the Valley Roots Food Hub, which is a sister hub to the East Denver Food Hub. And we serve about 110 producers and aggregate and distribute from the farm gate to the plate. And we have a 38-acre farm that has rich alluvial soil. The Rio Grande runs right through it, and it's a farm incubator. And this is nonprofit work, so a lot of this, which is just, by the way, a relationship to the IRS, not a economic model. But we have built this food system, and we have, thanks to many funders, we have been able to put in a beautiful education center, thanks to Great Outdoors Colorado and others, to be a center for regenerative education, agricultural education in the San Luis Valley. And we did all this by listening to the community voice and We also do a bilingual Cooking Matters program, and we are currently conducting a 6-county food and ag assessment and planning project. And I am just in a little bit of a weird space because I actually retired from that role, and there's a whole team of young, enthusiastic, on fire young folks who are taking it into the future, which is a great gift. And I am now serving as a Saguache County Commissioner in Saguache County, which is a rural agricultural county facing many water challenges and solutions. And so I continue to take my passion and core values for local food systems and farm to table and farm to institution at the county level. I got involved, and Julie, that was fun to hear your piece. And I didn't know Julie then, but a lot of our work was based around farm to school at the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition. And I first got involved with the Farm to School Task Force. And it was really because I was searching out the education and expertise and the kind of gatekeeper of resources in the state of Colorado around farm to school as we were trying to do that. And really the Valley Roots Food Hub was created to be that piece between the farm and the schools, was how we started out. And so the Farm to School Task Force was really integral. And somehow for me, the Farm to School Task Force segued into the Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council. I feel like the task force fizzled out and COFSAC was growing, and it's really important. Okay, Julie, yeah, good. I should have talked to you ahead of time and said exactly what was that. But it really was. COFSAC is like one of the few entities that regularly comes together in the state of Colorado to talk about food and agricultural food system issues, which I think it's very unique, and I'm very proud to be part of it. And I represent it says on the website, expertise in rural community and regional development or community and economic development programs. So yeah, I was appointed in, I believe 2019. I'm serving my second term right now.
Can I just add, so Liza, I'm going to say we didn't fizzle out, but we did all we could do because it needed to go to the next step. A task force cannot help. I mean, you can only help farmers and give them information. You can't farm. And so we created all these tools for this toolbox, but then we're kind of like, ooh, what's next? And so that's why it was great to roll it into COFSAC, the Colorado Food System Advisory Council, so that all parts of the food system could come together. But it probably looked like we fizzled out from the outside.
And I think that's a great segue. And I'm going to bring up Dawn as well, and Al. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you've kind of learned from your time with COFSAC to date? There you go.
I'm going to go first so that,
I can wear both the university hat, and I've also been involved in our regional food policy council activities, is two things. And it's been, I did not realize how many agencies at the state level really do touch food in some way or another. And, as coming from a College of Ag, I'd focused mostly on relationship building with Department of Agriculture, but been super helpful to have those other people in my orbit. And then, I guess the second would be just that there's best practices both in other parts of the state and other parts of the country that this group could kind of coalesce around. So it wasn't every single individual region having to go and do that fact finding, both less efficiently and perhaps less thoroughly. So those have been both the two aha moments and benefits to the work we do in regions around the state.
So I would like to add that, man, it's complicated. And way back from the beginning with Farm to School and with COFSAC, there are just so many steps, and we're all trying to do good work, but you get through one step and you have a little celebration, and then you have another step to go over. From my side, knowing more about animal proteins, I really have learned how no program fits everyone, and how we all have to be flexible, whether that's because of land use or because of water or labor. Everybody has a different need, a different distance to drive to deliver to their school or to their food hub. And so it's so complicated, but it's so rewarding.
Yeah, I think I'll sort of second what Dawn was saying about just how involved the food system really is, how many agencies and departments are in the conversation. I grew up in Washington, D.C., which has a really teeny tiny Department of Urban Agriculture that's within a really tiny Department of Energy and the Environment. And otherwise, we don't have a governor. There's not a state agency. And so I didn't really understand how state government worked, and how many different players can be involved. So just getting to do this in a large state compared to a not a state, and know who all the stakeholders are, know where the information is housed, know how both the CDA and CDE are involved in healthy school meals for all. It's been really interesting to learn how many folks in this state are doing different parts of this work.
Yeah, and I guess I'll say, a lesson learned is that the issues faced in my rural community around healthy food access for families and institutions, land access and entry issues for new and beginning farmers and producers, water conservation, the inequities in our food systems, and the capacity to bring in funding are common issues across our state. And that was something that was kind of eye-opening because I'd been kind of microscopically focused in the San Luis Valley. And like Al said, I've learned so much about the roles of our state agencies and the tremendous flow of resources that come through them. And so that's been really great to translate back to my community and to understand and share. And then I also think we planted a seed with legislators. I think it's the reason that I serve on the communication strategies and communications committee is because I really want our legislators to understand that the Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council exists to advise them in matters of state policy and issues, and that I think we're moving in the direction that they see us as a resource when they're faced with policy issues for advice and direction, that kind of thing.
So I've got one more question, then we'll open up to the attendees about any questions that they have. But what advice would you have for someone that is passionate about food or agriculture or food systems that wants to take a bigger role or step into the policy space that isn't necessarily on the Food System Advisory Council, might be somewhere else? What advice would you all have for those folks?
I think there's a lot of maybe less complicated. You have to have a lesser understanding of really nuanced policy. There's a lot of coalitions and open to the public meetings you can join. Libby, you mentioned the working group meetings, which I think are a great way. And Hunger Free Colorado has a public coalition for healthy school meals for all, for example, that you can join in on. I know in Denver, there's the Denver Sustainable Food Policy Council. So lots of local, hyper-local, hyper-specific, and fewer barriers to entry policy groups you can join. And to just ask questions, I had a huge resource in Wendy, who's a former COFSAC member, who just let me ask her really basic policy questions when I was first starting out. Just find folks who have the time to get a cup of coffee and ask them whatever you're wondering.
Oh, go ahead. No, go, Julie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say similar. Just go to a meeting, observe, and then start networking and find those people like Wendy that Al found that you could just talk to them and find out what's going on and figuring out where you can plug in. And if that's not going on in your area, then you can reach out to us and maybe we can point you the direction, because there's probably something going on, but publicizing and figuring it out sometimes can be a challenge.
Yeah, I really picture, you know, a sustainable food system on our planet is like a map of the internet where there's a node and a hub and they're all connected like a web across our planet. And so in every community, don't reinvent the wheel. Find the people who are working in your food system already and join up with them. You know, build relationships, show up at meetings, volunteer at farm work days, become a member of a local CSA program, get to know your farmers, attend farm tours. Um, I just named some conferences here. Go to conferences like the Colorado Food Summit in Denver, the Agri Summit in Chaffee County, the Soil Food and Farm Forum in Montrose. And I think in Pueblo, right, coming up is the Sun, Soil, Water Ag Summit in Pueblo. And there's just so many great, you know, join Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, join Farm Bureau, join the National Young Farmers Coalition, participate in policy conversations. And one of the things, I used to be a Live Well coordinator under Wendy when it was Live Well, and for our community. And one of the greatest gifts they did is they taught us how to create a relationship with your legislators. And really, that is a key piece for advancing policy and creating that relationship. And there's also some great listservs out there that, like Johns Hopkins University and the Wallace Center and many others, CSU has, you know, wonderful, you know, newsletters and events and data that you can gather. So there's so many resources out there. And yeah,
Well, and I can nest my answer and start answering a question all at the same time. So, you know, I obviously from CSU have a unique perspective because we have an extension office in every county. We have a way to engage. We're involved with all the regions, but I would say this is actually a good year because with this idea that we're probably going to be having regional discussions instead of state discussions, you know, get to that. And if you actually even feel like you're in a role that you can host one of that. So Tori, I don't know, I don't remember where you're from, but you know, speak up and say you might want to host one of those regional conversations. And that might be the exact way for some regions who don't have a council yet to actually start seeing if there's enough energy around, you know, coalescing a council. So in addition to this group and to CSU Extension, like if we were going to redo the blueprint today, it might look like a different set of actors who are hosting those conversations. And certainly everyone you saw before, Nourish is still very active. We have, you know, a great food security network across the state, but also now the Economic Development Council of Colorado is also asking if we can help them in hosting regional discussions because this is becoming top of mind in the economic development sector as well. So I would say, yeah, well, Tori, we have a food shed, so we need to get connected. We just haven't turned into a council yet, but you know, I think this is a good time to perhaps raise your hand and even say if you're in a position to host. That's if you've kind of got a location specific interest in food policy, which a lot of you probably do. If you have an issue specific one, that's where this invitation to perhaps listen in on our COFSAC quarterly meetings or being a part of one of our working groups might make sense. So I think a lot of people come at food in one of two ways, where they are and wanting to bring food security back to the place they live and the communities they want to build. And some are very, very issues focused on there's a specific issue. And I think how you would engage with these discussions is very different from which of those angles you come at. And if it's a community angle, again, this is a great year because whether there's a council in your region or not, if there is, let's help you get connected. And if not, let's see if we can get a good regional discussion going in this next year, particularly if you're willing to be a host in whatever hat you're wearing in the world and see how much energy there is around that. So it's a good time to throw your hat in the ring. And Tori, we certainly can talk because we do have a food shed project up here who would love to have a council in the city. And I'm actually having a talk with the city next week. But sometimes it doesn't need for there to be a council either. Sometimes there's a good enough community nonprofit organization that carries that same mission that we would probably are using that language too formally, that it always has to be a policy council. We think who informs these things at the regional level has taken a lot of different shapes and forms, and we've been excited to see those be whatever that region needs to be the most effective for them.
Tori, I'd also add, I know Liza mentioned different farmers union chapters, but Flatiron's Farmers Coalition, I'm not sure if that's their exact name, but they exist and they're similar to the Mile High Farmers Union, where they are advocating for what local growers and local food policy stakeholders feel is important in that area. And there's ones all over the state. There's a Roaring Fork Valley one. There out west. There's one up near Steamboat, I think. So there's a ton of different chapters full of really local advocates who can inform your local government what is important to them, what their priorities are.
Yeah, and I might like to answer Tori's too, because I think, Tori, I'm not sure if you are with a local government, but something we've done in Saguache County is we took a ballot measure to the people of our county to authorize a sales tax that is a sales tax grant, and you can apply for small grants, and that's a way that we've really supported our sustainable food space. And San Miguel County actually has a program where they pay producers to sequester carbon. So there's a lot of cool ways that county governments, local governments, and municipalities can support a food system, not to mention the whole food bank piece.
Any other things you want to share about that? If you don't have an organizational structure already, place how to collect energies, ideas, people in the space. Otherwise, does any of the other panelists have any last thoughts or regards that they would like to share with this audience?
I guess I would just say do exactly what Tori's doing in the chat box. If any of us has said something or is in a region that is the best to connect with you, I think all of us are willing to do an individual follow-up with you all. So if you want to connect with us, I think we're willing to share our emails and you can follow up with us directly. But all we would say is that COFSAC was intended to be very much bringing the public's voice to state leadership that's making big decisions in this space. And don't be shy about attending our quarterly meetings. Guess we could put the website again where we generally post our schedule, and there's always a spot on that agenda for anyone visiting who's not a member to bring an issue that's coming up in their space or the region to share that. And then besides that, again, following up if you feel like there's a regional discussion to be had in your region, just planting the seed to get that conversation started. And we'd appreciate bringing that voice to us.
We got 2 additional questions in the chat box. One is recognizing that there are lots of folks working in this space across the state. How do we assure that folks aren't reinventing the wheel and just going off working independently, that we actually find ways to work better together?
Well, I can share a story in the San Luis Valley. So it took us a while to build the capacity to be able to reach out and partner with others. And now we're part of a food web that we have been funded through a local food promotion program from the USDA that involves the East Denver Food Hub, the Guidestone in Chaffee County, Mountain Roots in Gunnison County, the Good Food Collective in La Plata County, and Farm Runners. Yeah, and we're all, and it's just kind of like we built enough capacity to reach out then and start serving a bigger region, and so it's grown very organically, and I really liked that that growth and partnership with brother and sister organizations, in our region and in our footprint.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, some of that just comes from being in these spaces. I think the 3 food hubs in the group that Liza just mentioned, we were all sort of doing really similar work in really different ways and maybe not all talking to each other about it to the extent that we should have. And then at the Food Summit, you're able to all get around a table, you're able to just be like, okay, what are we doing? How can we work better together? And just have those conversations. I had a similar conversation with some folks at Hunger Free Colorado this past weekend in response to to Healthy School Meals for All. So I think it's just about starting those conversations. If you don't see anybody else doing it, I at least tend to be one that's just going to speak up and say what needs to be done.
And I would just second I mean, that's really the purpose of the Food Summit, is to pull different parties together and network and meet people. And so if if you're looking for someone to partner with, they may be there, or, there's someone else that can point you to who's doing what.
Yeah, and there was a great question, and it complements what we just answered about how do we assure we're coordinating across the state. Well, we can't, but I guarantee you, as someone who's been watching from the sidelines for 25 years plus, we are so much better coordinated than we were before COFSAC. And that's with things getting more complex and there being more activity. So I think we have not solved the entire issue, but we've improved it. And this kind of leads to, well, how does this come alongside things like the blueprint to end hunger? Well, I think it's very much, like I said, coming alongside. There are always going to be groups who are far more deliberately focused and context rich about specific issues in the food system, like Blueprint and Hunger's group was on that food security realm. What I feel like we've been given the charge of in COFSAC is to think systematically, because even when food security is top of mind, we all know there's linkages to what's happening with market channels and producer viability and sustainability initiatives that are happening that have to be thought about as like, well, let's have our main win be food security, but are there some other places we can also address other challenges and opportunities that with the ripple effects will influence. And so I think that's COFSAC's job, is to think about where we can connect more dots, but let some of those other groups that can really lead and do deep dives better than we can lead those issues, but us be the folks saying, well, but maybe we should also make sure we get some people from this community there, or we get your Blueprint 10 hunger talking points in front of this group. So I think that's how we see ourselves. And I think that's good for the state, because sometimes the agencies admit they don't even fully keep track of what each other is doing that might interact in their spaces. So I think we always have this lens on of like how we can leverage anything and any energy anyone is putting into food initiatives and make sure there's the largest set of winners possible. And as Liza said so eloquently, that people aren't reinventing the wheel. And if lessons have been learned, making sure everybody has those shared with them before they take the next step.
And then,
Wonderful. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Liza.
oh, I was just going to say, I'm just throwing out an observation, but I always wondered why the Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger and the Colorado Blueprint on Food and Ag didn't talk to each other, or they're separate things out there, or how it is that the Blueprint to End Hunger has become so front and center, and the Blueprint for Food and Ag hasn't been connected to it. And maybe that's just in my world that didn't happen, but anyway.
We went to each other's activities, but they just again wanted to do a deeper dive, and we weren't going to tell them not to. And that just had to be one component. That one of the hosts in each of our regions, we had 4 hosts, and one of the hosts in each of those regions was from the Live Well / Nourish food security community. But there was just a far broader set of topics the Blueprint wanted to handle. So I think we made sure to go to enough of their events to know they weren't working at odds with each other, but they just wanted to do a very, very specific deep dive. And we had a whole bunch of our agency, if you just look at the names of our agencies, we had to be broad. And they chose to be narrow, and they did a really good job on that slice of the pie. We were just trying to cover the whole pie. And we still probably, and I learn something new every day because we keep, as Libby said, we've brought a bunch of new members since then, that if we'd have had those voices, it'd have been probably even more inclusive as a report. So we're going to continue to evolve, is my guess. And the questions here just are very representative of what we hoped we would get having this webinar, and it was a great idea, Libby, to host it. Is you know, we need to just make sure people even know we're there, and then if people come to us and there's something we're not equipped to handle because it's super food security oriented, we at least all now know the right people to hand folks off to now, and compared to 10 years ago, that's so much improved, in my opinion.
First off, I just want to say a huge thank you to the panelists for sharing their time and perspectives and ideas with this group, and then also to all of you all for joining us and sharing and your questions. But related to this, I think one of the things that I have learned more over the last year about the Colorado Food System Advisory Council is trying to find the line between research, information, deep dives, coordination, and advocacy. And so we, as a state-appointed board, are really narrowly confined in this space of research, data collection, interviews, stakeholder engagement, and being responsive to state agencies and elected officials to kind of guide our direction. So here are a couple of resources and opportunities for you all to get involved. They were mostly mentioned. I'll put some of these links in the chat. If you want to get involved in the work group, just fill out the form on our website and we'll get you connected and send the calendar invites to you all. We also have updates. So there's a sign up for our newsletter kind of thing. We don't send out newsletters very often. I think this webinar might have been the first time that we'd really done correspondence there, but we have been collecting state agency updates, written updates from those 6 state agencies. And we would like to start sharing that with folks so people are aware of what is the Department of Public Health and the Environment doing in food and agricultural spaces, what's happening with SNAP, enrollment processes across the state, what are the trends that they're seeing, so that if you're working in this space that you can be a little bit more informed and aware, and also identifying potentially opportunities for advocacy. As we're seeing already in the chat, you guys are connecting in this space, so that's awesome. We want to keep seeing that and figuring out how we can support that. We'll hope to see that with the regional convenings as well, so we put the link in there. And then finally, in the summer of 2024, there will be 6 openings for appointment for the Colorado Food System Advisory Council. Keep your eyes on that. And then going towards the advocacy side, I wanted to make everyone aware on this webinar that kind of thinking about whose lane is whose and how to work collectively more impactfully. Hunger Free Colorado is really spearheading efforts around advocacy for assuring that the Healthy School Meals for All is fully funded and supported by the state. It has been an incredibly successful program. The Colorado Food System Advisory Council did research and identified how universal meal programs can get rolled out, what that might look like. And then Hunger Free really helped create a coalition of energy on the ground to get that through passage. And now we're finding ourselves confronting a shortfall at the state level in terms of the budget. And so Hunger Free is really leading that charge. So there is a call this afternoon at 2:30 to 4 p.m. thinking about how to strategize. They've also provided an email that like language that you can send to your local elected officials, and it's really a conversation starter. So I will be sure to put
one thing about
please.
the HSMA conversation, in addition to all of Hunger Free's great tools, if you are interested, if you feel this is like really your passion and you're interested in some more direct advocacy, including talking to the media and receiving media training, please feel free to send me an email. That's a big thing that East Denver Food Hub is going to be involved in, and we have some reporters and media training advocates in our.
And with that, we'll wrap it up. Happy to answer anybody's emails or follow up with conversation. Thanks again.